walking through forests late at night. We were going on to farms at 1 or 2 in the morning, sleeping all day, being awake all night. That was a project that took like an entire year. A cross-Canada mink farm investigation involved going to dozens and dozens of farms across Canada. Or when the investigation was actually released, it just didn't have the impact that we thought it would have. And we were left wondering with like why that is. You know, animals do need us, but we need data to be able to understand how we can actually make a difference. Animal industries have many, many, many billions of dollars that they use in marketing and advertising, political lobbying, in getting their products into stores.
Why you have moved from the frontline advocacy to more of in the research and being in the back end and trying to help the movement is because the impact is large, or probably it's much more impactful.
Hello and welcome to a brand new season of Caffelogue with Naga. After conversations that explore leadership, innovation, technology, sustainability, ethical veganism, and purposeful living, Season 2 begins with a question that challenges the way we think about the future. Can technology become a force for compassion? Can artificial intelligence help us build a world where every life matters? Our guest today sits at the intersection of technology, research, storytelling, and animal advocacy. Someone who believes that meaningful change doesn't happen only through passion, but through understanding evidence and informed action. Karol Orzechowski is a long-time animal advocate, filmmaker, researcher, and the AI policy and initiatives lead, working as resource director at Faunalytics, an organization dedicated to empowering animal advocates with research and insights to create greater impact. Before his work exploring the role of research and emerging technologies in advocacy, Karol used the power of filmmaking to bring attention to one of the most complex and often hidden areas of animal exploitation. In 2012, he directed the acclaimed documentary, Maximum Tolerated Dose.
My name is Rachel Weiss, and we're in Atlanta, Georgia, and we're right up or downstream from the Yerkes National Primate Research Center main campus. I feel like he kept me around because he needed somebody, and I was really the only one regularly there. I mean, there were other people who cared about him, but...
A powerful and thought-provoking film that examines animal experimentation through the voice of scientists, former laboratory workers, investigators, and the animals who experience life inside the research facilities. The film explores not only the scientific questions surrounding animal testing, but also the ethical and emotional realities. Through filmmaking, research and advocacy work, Karol has spent years asking difficult questions about our relationship with other sentient beings, and how knowledge, storytelling, and now artificial intelligence can become tools for creating a more compassionate future. From his years of investigative work,
I do films about animals because I am an activist, and I'm not afraid to be an activist, and I feel like filmmaking is my biggest skill. I feel like I'm good at making films, and so I love animals, I care about them, and I wanted to use what I feel like is my best skill set to push that forward. I want the general public to know that there are scientists out there, scientists themselves, who think animal research is wrong and who want to either find alternatives or not take part in it at all. The question for me isn't whether animals are similar to human beings.
The first and maybe biggest problem that the animal movement has to deal with is the problem of scale. So simply put, the vast majority of people in the world are not really aware of the scale at which we use animals in our everyday lives. If you ask someone how many animals we consume each year, they may say something like a lot, but that is an understatement. And if you ask them for a specific number, they will probably really lowball it. In 2018, which is the last year that we have statistics for from the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, we slaughtered over 71 billion land animals, most of them chickens. That's about 10 animals per person per year globally.
I'm just a guy who works at a data organization. I've been an animal advocate since 2005. I did both my bachelor and master's degrees in animal rights related topics. I'm a documentary filmmaker and former undercover investigator for many years, and I've been Faunalytics content director for the last decade. I'm also an amateur programmer and have been a web dev since 1996, believe it or not. I'm a longtime attendee of the DEF CON hacking conference. I've used social engineering and hacking techniques in numerous animal rights investigations, and in my spare time I like to break stuff.
Documenting animal suffering through his work exploring how data, communication, and emerging technologies like AI can shape the future of advocacy. Karol brings a unique perspective on one of the humanity's biggest responsibilities, how we coexist with our sentient beings. In this episode, we explore the fascinating world of AI and animal advocacy, the possibilities of ethical questions, the risks, and the opportunities ahead. What happens when one of humanity's most powerful technologies meets one of humanity's deepest moral questions? Let's dive into this important conversation. Wait, if you've made it this far, I have a feeling you're one of us. You are someone who is clearly into conversations that go deeper about health, lifestyle, and the purpose behind how we choose to live. 60% of people who watch these episodes from Caffelogue with Naga haven't subscribed yet, which means that there are a lot of you who are quietly watching us from shadows. And if you're one of them, why not make it official? Hit that subscribe button. It's free. It just takes a second. And you don't have to stumble upon us by accident. You know where to find us. And while you're here, there are much more meaningful insights and wonderful conversations for you to listen to. So pick one. I promise it will make you think.
Thank you so much, Karol. A very warm welcome and happy to have you in Caffelogue with Naga Season 2.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure to have you today, and I've been looking forward for this conversation because of the work you and the Faunalytics team is doing, to how it's transforming the way we approach animal advocacy. So as I actually was thinking about getting back on the Caffelogue with Naga Season 2, I couldn't think of more better guest than you to start or begin this chapter. So thank you so much. And
Well, thank you so much for saying that. That's very kind of you. And, I'm excited to see where the conversation goes.
definitely, I know you, and at least I've done kind of research on Faunalytics, but people who are not aware of you and Faunalytics, probably just give a quick intro on Faunalytics and your role and what you've been doing. So just let's start with that.
Yeah, sure. So Faunalytics is a research organization for animal advocates. And broadly speaking, what that means is that we do a lot of independent research projects and summarize a lot of research that is related to animal advocacy in all of its forms. So we maintain a pretty big research library that currently contains over 6,000 entries. We also put out a regular clip of original research projects, which often are comprehensive polls or scientific research of our own. And currently, I believe we have over 70 of those that we've done over the years. And all of this is made available for free for animal advocates around the world. So that's kind of like the nutshell summary of what Faunalytics does. And for anyone who's not familiar with us, probably the first place to start is to check out our website, which is at faunalytics.org.
Yep. Thank you. I think the organization has existed or currently existing for the last 20 years, right? I think 2 decades. That's
actually closer to 26 now. So it started in the year 2000. It was started by Che Green, and it used to be called Humane Research Council. And back then it was largely geared around sort of trying to apply ideas around market research to animal advocacy. So this is before terms like effective altruism existed, before the sort of research angle of animal advocacy existed in the way that it does now. And then in 2015, we did a rebrand and rebranded Faunalytics. People used to get a little bit confused by the name Humane Research Council. They thought we were an organization that advocated for humane research on animals or things like that. So a rebrand was pretty necessary. And so that's, 26 years of history. And I have been with the organization for the last 12, so almost half.
That's wonderful to hear. I know, as I said, even before the understanding of effective altruism or, ethical vegan or veganism as such, more of the movement. So this is this is way beyond, way before that. I would say not too far, but at least in 2000s, not pretty much, except a few, pioneers who were only talking about plant-based food and all that. But the research is something I think, I don't know how he thought that, how we can help the animal advocacy movement by in the form of research and putting out as a probably a starter or a help. How do we bring out more information which is easier for the community to actually use that and talk to the broader people across the world. So that's fascinating to see somebody has thought differently.
Yeah, I think that Che's, I mean, I'm going to speak for him a little bit now. I think Che's experience was similar to a lot of animal advocates' experience, which is that we have a lot of experience with doing campaigns or doing actions that maybe feel good emotionally, things that might be cathartic or might help us to sort of process our emotional response to the animal suffering. But then at the end of the day, in the sort of final analysis of those actions, we look at what they've accomplished and we feel like we didn't make an impact. And so I think Che's approach to trying to apply research to advocacy, was very similar to my own journey. Right before I started with Faunalytics, I was in the process of doing a cross-Canada mink farm investigation. And that was a project that took an entire year and involved going to dozens and dozens of farms across Canada. Or when the investigation was actually released, it just didn't have the impact that we thought it would have. And we were left wondering with why that is. And so I think Che's experience, it would be lovely to think that it just was a nice idea that he had, but I think in a certain way it was born out of a sense of
Necessity.
Frustration. Yeah, frustration with seeing your hard work not really move the needle for
reaching
animals.
True. I think it, to an extent, I would still agree at this time and age with AI. Even at 2026, I see a lot of times it's pretty difficult to actually take credible information out to the public, because a lot of times it's more noise.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. We are in a media landscape that is very saturated, very full, and it's very difficult to understand what is the best information to take in and what to set aside.
Right. At least I'm aligned with the thought process. I think the shift or the change in name, because the reason is humane research councils. But today everybody talks about humane slaughter, and still agree that it's still acceptable, right? So that's how they actually whitewash, or ethical washing, they're supposed to be called, right? Yeah. So that's true.
Certainly.
Thanks for sharing that insight and how Faunalytics was born. Tell me about your journey, right? What was your what inspired you to be part of this journey? If as a I mean, not just from Faunalytics, but prior to that, you've been doing it probably somewhere during your school or during your universities. You felt that okay, this is my calling. And what was that? And tell us your journey into this field of animal advocacy and research.
Yeah, sure. So I was always into punk music when I was a young person, and I listened to a lot of punk bands who were very political and had strong political messages around all sorts of different issues. And in 2001, I went to a concert by a punk band based in Canada called Propagandy, and they had a local animal rights group speak before they played, and it was very powerful. They showed a vivisection, like an anti-vivisection video, and it was very, very powerful. And then they also have some songs that are related to animal rights, which really affected me. And so after that concert, I went vegetarian, and a couple of years later, I got involved with an animal rights radio show through the University of Toronto, and the host of that show was really encouraging and really gave me a lot of tools that helped me to go vegan at the time. So that was, well, I'm still vegan now, but that was 21 years ago, 2005. And so I was the co-producer of that radio show for a number of years, and that was kind of my primary form of advocacy. I did my undergraduate and my master's study on sort of animal ethics related topics. And then in 2009, I started doing investigations. And so I was traveling around the world working with animal advocacy groups because I had learned how to do, I was a photographer and a videographer. So I offered, essentially offered my services to animal advocacy groups to try and help them get better materials for their work, and ended up traveling around the world doing that for a few years. I released a documentary in 2012 called Maximum Tolerated Dose, which is like a film about animal experimentation told through the stories of former lab workers and former laboratory animals, and then was continuing to do investigations until around the end of 2014. I was hired by Faunalytics, Humane Research Council at the time, and then I continued to do both investigations and this research work for another year or two. As far as like my research background, so I mean, I had an undergraduate degree and a master's degree, but they were more in kind of like cultural studies, like qualitative research. My sort of like quantitative research background was pretty thin, but I had, one of my roles at Faunalytics was to read academic research and to summarize it for our website. This is obviously before AI and things like that. And so I personally ended up reading, I think certainly over 1,000 studies myself and summarizing them, and that really gave me a crash course in research methods. I did a lot of reading on quantitative methods and how to show quantitative information in design, and then part of my role with Faunalytics has always been on the technical side of things. So I have a long-standing background in like website development and coding and things like that. I grew up in the 1990s. I had my first website when I was 15 in 1996. Actually, I have my first website that I ever had. This is how old I am. I had to send in a physical check to a company to register the website because you couldn't pay online with credit cards yet. So I've had a long. I've brought all of those skills into Faunalytics, and that's been my journey up until now.
Great. I mean, I would say it's like multifaceted, and probably, I mean, everything what you have done has actually shaped the transition to the next step or next career, probably over the course, right? So it's not like, it's just happened by chance, but you had, and then you try to explore. Yeah, I can relate to when you said, I mean, I grew up when we didn't have internet. So I think my internet experience was actually only when you are actually passing out of high school, because in India, the high school exam results are actually public. So it's a public examination. So the results come out in the so you go and check your roll number if you're pass or fail. So So I had
No
to really,
pressure, right?
yeah.
No pressure.
So there's no internet at homes, right? So you have to go and wait in the internet center. I think you pay like, I think probably like 200, 300 rupees for just spending that 10 minutes to get that result checked. So I know those are different times, now with
Yeah,
all the access.
I certainly remember going to internet cafes
Yeah.
and, sort of renting internet access by the minute or by the, half hour.
Yeah.
Certainly, yeah.
That's a different time. Now everything is in your fingertip,
Exactly, yeah.
including, as you talked about, the summarization and things like that. The problem I feel is like, with all this access, probably the thinking is stopped. I think the ability to think beyond what AI is giving, or how you can just human
Hmm.
research output. Yeah, I think AI does a better job, or probably it's quickly doing it, but I think sometimes what your brain brings, or probably your thoughts brings out, is much better or authentic, I feel sometimes.
Yeah, it's difficult because I think that these partly what
LLMs,
you were
yeah.
yeah, partly what you were saying before about how there's just so much noise and there's so much out there. I think that we've gone from a sort of internet culture, like a seeking culture, where
Mm,
people have to go out and look for things
mm,
and kind of explore and discover things, and it's more time consuming, to like a filtering culture where now we have to there's so much coming at us all the time that we need to find ways of just going through it and finding what is actually useful.
right.
And one of the sort of promises of AI, I think, whether it delivers it or not, is up for debate. But one of the promises of AI is that it will help us to sift through those things and kind of boil all of this information down to something useful.
I think it also depends on who's consuming it.
Certainly.
That exactly is, and what kind of input you're giving, or what kind of questions you're actually asking. So that makes that LLM or model better.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I know you probably touched upon. So why did you continue? I know that probably the job is more fascinating to read and research and try to help the movement in terms of elevate what the work they're putting on the ground to a much more higher. So the impact is, if I kind of understand why you have moved from the frontline advocacy to more of in the research and being in the back end and trying to help the movement, is because the impact is large, or probably it's much more impactful than being in
Yeah.
the front line.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think at the core of it, doing investigative work is tough. Like it's emotionally difficult. People that do it obviously are very, very committed to it, and you have to be, because it's certainly not a way to get rich or
Mhm.
anything like that. Like it's hard work, and it is one of the lowest compensated roles in animal advocacy.
Mhm.
But so there was an aspect of it for me that wasn't sustainable, like physically and
Mhm.
emotionally. As I was going along, you know, it's hard, especially when you're doing the kind of physical work. The last investigation that I did on mink farms, we were walking through forests late at night. We were going on to farms at 1 or 2 in the morning, sleeping all day, being awake all night. It's hard. And then of course, like, there's all of the environmental factors. You're in big facilities with lots of like feces and other things around that you're breathing in all the time. You have, there's the stress of actually performing the
Yeah.
duties. It's very, like, in certain ways it's very high adrenaline. It's
And
can be
demanding.
quite tough. Yeah, it's very demanding. Um, and truthfully, like, when I started at Faunalytics, I thought maybe I would do it for 6 months or a year, because I thought I would still be doing investigative work. But after doing it for a year, I found out I really enjoyed it. It used a different part of my brain. It used a different set of my skills. It was certainly safer for me to do, and and I was also in a sort of a different point in my life. I was getting close to, I was in my mid-30s, and I was starting to think about, like, well, how can I continue to contribute to animal advocacy in a way that feels good for me? And as I continued to get more into the science and the research, I just found that I really, really enjoyed it. I got to do, like, graphic design on infographics. I got to read, getting to read research as part of your job is pretty awesome. and and I also love writing, so it was a chance for me to practice writing more. And that was just such a blessing. So it turned out that I didn't really think that this would be part of my career path, but once I got into it, I realized just, like, how much I enjoy it and how much I can contribute in this way.
Got it. I think it comes from a sense of fulfillment, or probably yeah. I know sometimes some decisions are pretty tough, but I think you have to do thinking about the long term impact. Like, I mean, sometimes it's not just professionally what we want to do, but how does that have an effect on our personal life, and how do we sustain that for longer? So that's an important point to look at. Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, sometimes some people are cut out for more of frontline advocacy for a long time, but sometimes we have to take a choice. It's not, nothing is good or bad, it's more of what suits you.
For sure. I mean, I love that my work now can actually support frontline advocates. That I can do projects that actually help frontline advocates be more effective and do their work more effectively. I think, yeah, it's one of the other reasons that working with Faunalytics was such a great choice at the time too, was that it's always been a fully remote workplace, and so all of my work colleagues are remote as well, and that provided me with a lot of flexibility at the beginning. So I continued doing investigations for the first couple of years, as I sort of, like, transitioned slowly out of that world and into this one. And I should say too, one of the things that has kept me at Faunalytics for so long is I just genuinely really love the people I work with. I work with such an amazing team, and it's one of the only places I've ever worked where I can truly say that I like everyone that I work with. And it is
Wonderful.
that's such a rare thing, but it's really made my work life so fulfilling.
A quick coffee break. If you're enjoying this conversation, there's a good chance you're going to enjoy what's coming next too. And here is something interesting. A lot of people watching Caffelogue with Naga haven't subscribed yet. So if you're one of them, this is your little reminder. Hit that subscribe button. It's free. It takes a second. And it helps us bring much more curious minds and conversations like this to you. All right, let's get back to the conversation. The coffee break is over.
Wow, it's definitely rare to hear. That's true. I think and one more thing, probably the reason could be because when the company is also doing business for good, like for a purpose, which is much more larger than life, and it's much more important from a, I would say, world to be a better place. so
Totally.
that
I
also
mean,
adds to it.
yeah, I mean, I worked in the private sector for a few years, and just there was no motivation there for me. I'm not motivated to work harder to make my boss a few extra dollars of profit. Like, that doesn't appeal to me in any way.
Right.
And so I really didn't thrive in the private sector. I didn't enjoy it. It didn't do anything for me. And so part of my journey from academia into investigative work was, yes, it was certainly not the most well compensated role, but I genuinely liked doing the work, and I didn't feel yeah, I felt like I was doing something good.
Yeah, not for the sake of doing. Like I have to meet ends, so I'm just being part of this vicious cycle.
Yeah,
So
absolutely, absolutely.
yeah, there's a lot of misconception about do people have about researchers and it's in general, right? But
Hmm.
especially in this field, which is very nascent when you started, because somebody says, "Hey, I'm actually doing research to help the animal advocacy movement." How was I mean, in general, how do your friends or anybody who you talked to perceived or had any opinion, or what was your thought?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's interesting because my when I was doing frontline advocacy and doing investigative work, a lot of my close friends were also vegan. Like I was very involved in like the Toronto animal rights scene, for
Mm,
lack of a better word. Like a lot of my social events and my social network was other vegans. When I moved back to my hometown in the early 2010s, there was not the same kind of like vegan scene here. Like there was only a couple of vegetarian restaurants, and it was much quieter. But I found that the people that I gravitated towards, my friends and that sort of thing, were not necessarily like animal rights people. They're not all vegan or anything like that, but they were very, in many ways, like much more open to talking about those issues. And yeah, misconceptions about researchers, I'm not sure. It's uh I think my friends have always known me as someone who's like interested in really like diving deep into topics, and even in my personal life on other things that I'm interested in, I will go very deep into topics and read many books about one very specific thing, or that sort of thing has always been a big part of my life.
got it. I know Faunalytics. I mean, being an analytics person, I mean, I've been with data world for the last 25 plus years. I think of it was not really as big as we say, because even people talk about, everybody talks about data science and LLMs and models today. But I think 10 years back, or before even ChatGPT, I don't think so many, but many, no, there was still classic ML, and there was still research on machine learning algorithms have happening, but not at the scale of what we have. So I can understand the importance of analytics, or why an analytics lens needed for an animal advocacy movement, or why it came into existence. But looking at the slogan, right, animals need you, you need data. So so why data is so important? So maybe if a layman, I think today, the world we are, people understand the importance of data. But when you coin this, or so how did people understand the importance of data? So how did you start doing this?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the I certainly saw data become more important and more valued in the early 2010s, when companies like Facebook and YouTube and these other big platforms. It was understood that part of the sort of like bargain of using these platforms was that you got this wonderful social network for
Mm,
free. The way that this network was surviving was that it was harvesting all of this data to be able to sell advertising, to be able to like learn more about you. There were a series of news stories throughout the 2010s that involved what people would call big data. So these big election campaigns and things like that really revolved around like very deep analytics into populations and things like that. And those were, I would say, more like nefarious uses of data, like maybe not the nicest uses of data. But what they showed was that data can be thought of as a way to better understand how people are connected, what people are thinking, how people behave, what are things that can change people's behavior. And as it applies to animal advocacy, I think the biggest thing is that animal advocacy is, for most people, a very emotionally driven cause. Most people who are involved in animal advocacy can remember specific moments that really like affected them deeply. Maybe like you could even say like scarred them. People have these stories that are very intense about animal suffering, about animal rescue, and those emotions are like a key motivator in how we go from sort of being passive to being active. But those emotions are also very misleading and can take us down some roads that are maybe not the most effective. You know, when I was just starting out doing animal advocacy, I loved standing outside of a fur store and yelling at people. I thought it was great. In some ways, I still want to be that person because I look at what's happening to fur-bearing animals, for example, or animals used in laboratories, or animals used for food, and I think it's horrifying. But standing on a street corner and yelling at people isn't really the most effective thing, even if that's what your heart is telling you you need to do. And so, you know, animals do need us, but we need data to be able to understand how we can actually make a difference. Animal industries have many, many, many billions of dollars that they use in marketing and advertising, in political lobbying, in getting their products into stores. And animal advocates don't have that. So we need to, there's that saying like work smarter, not harder. We need to work hard and smart. We don't have the luxury of being able to just sort of do things that feel good. We need to understand what actually works and then feel good about that.
True. I think that's a sense of understanding today, that data is the new dynamite or whatever you want to call it. But you cannot live with just data. What you have, you need to leverage to make right decisions for your business. So in this case, if we can leverage to actually help the animal movement to take it, move forward and get something. A lot of good things have happened in the recent past in terms of getting a lot of bills moved, or a lot of
Certainly.
decisions from the government across different countries. So it's definitely welcoming change compared to how it was 10 years back.
Yeah, and a lot has I mean, in the last 10 years we've seen a huge explosion in plant-based options in restaurants, in grocery stores, and a lot of the research is finding that it's not necessarily because more people are vegan. In fact, the percentage of people who are actually vegan is quite flat over the years. It's that more people are interested in reducing their animal product intake, and more companies are interested in serving that market. And so you have a situation which is which I find very interesting, which is that a lot of plant-based companies are actually subsidiaries of meat companies, for example. And one of my favorite examples to bring up is it's actually in the house right now, but I love doing like oppositional research. So I read a lot of like meat industry publications and things like that. And I have a subscription to a magazine based in North America called Meeting Place, MEAT, Meeting Place. And it's a big glossy magazine. It arrives every month and tells me all about the meat industry. But I also subscribe to a magazine called Alt Meat, and it is a magazine entirely about like protein, alternative proteins, plant-based proteins. And the most interesting thing about these two magazines is they're actually published by the same company, and it's the same people who work at both magazines. It's many of the same journalists and things like that work at both magazines, and it's just because from a capitalist perspective, why only sell products to one part of the population? You want to capture as much of the population as possible.
True, but you still okay. That's something which is I mean, I'm trying to look at from different lens. So one is as a hardcore animal advocate or probably ethical vegan. So we don't want to support that. But then if you look at the, as you said, as much if a capitalist or a corporate is trying to do something good in any small way, like
Mhm.
even starting an alternative protein or an alt meat product in their product line to cater to interested people or who want to stop consuming or less consume less meat. Do you
Mhm.
think that's still good, or do you it's a
Yeah,
tricky
that's a.
question.
I mean, I in those cases I would prefer to always support like a fully plant-based company or a company that where they have a deeper mission than just selling stuff. One of the things that I learned when I was doing investigative work, I did a major investigation into the exotic animal trade in Southeast
Hmm.
Asia, and so I talked to a lot of people who farm exotic animals for various reasons. And one of the things that I realized is that a lot of the time it just boils down to money. I don't really think that when it comes to like big meat companies, right? I don't necessarily think that the people who work at those companies or the big, the executives and that sort of thing, I don't necessarily think that they are like evil people who hate animals. In many ways, they might love their
Dogs
companion
and cats.
animals or they, that sort of thing. But they have found a way to make themselves very wealthy. And if they could make themselves wealthy selling shoes or hats or plant-based proteins, like if they could make more money doing
Yep.
something else, then they would gladly do that. So a lot of the time, I don't think like I don't think for most industries their motivation is harm. I don't think most people and most companies are motivated by something bad. They're motivated by something they see as good, which is making money. We could certainly argue whether making money in the capitalist sense is good or not.
Yeah,
I think there's
it's the
good
rising
arguments back
stocks.
and forth about it, but I don't love it. Let's put it that way. I don't love that. I don't love that my favorite like oat milk is made by a company that is owned by a massive dairy company. I
Yeah.
don't love that that one of my favorite plant-based burgers is made by a company that is owned by a major meat producer. But this is the economic system we're in, right? It's as soon as a company, like a plant-based company, gets big enough, like what happened with this particular like oat milk company, the companies that are bigger than them start looking at them and go, we want that market, like we want to capture that market, and so they buy them, and uh, that's just the nature of the system.
Yeah, I think it's difficult to, but based on what your research data says at this point, right? How
Hmm.
I think every now and then there are mushrooming plant-based companies who try to bring up something new or a
Hmm.
product line which actually probably is existing, but they want to add more from a market standpoint to actually diversify or help the demand, right, from the vegan population or probably who wants, and a lot of people are dairy intolerant, so it could be for whatever reason. So but as you said, it's a very unsustainable market, and it's the longevity depends on the capital or the how much you have to be answerable to your investors. So in turns it becomes more of a difficult situation after a while. So how do you see that from a research standpoint? Have you done any research specifically on these companies over the period? What's becoming tough in this market, because everybody keeps changing. There's a shift if you see even on um, uh, the companies who are promoting, or even the restaurants. I think I don't want to name, but the New York, the famous restaurant, the chef started adding meat because he felt that's necessity from an inclusivity perspective. But I think everybody has different of opinion. But yeah, I want to hear your research, what it says, and have you done any specific thought about?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't done specific research on like market research on plant-based companies. We've done research on sort of like what motivates people to adopt plant-based eating and that sort of thing. From my own personal observations, again, just these are my own personal observations, not
Yeah, that's fine.
certainly not investment advice or anything like that. But I think that one of the things that's been interesting over the years is seeing how, when I first became vegan, a lot of companies were very small. The plant-based companies were, a lot of the food was manufactured in the United States or Canada by very small companies. They might have one factory or they might have a couple of factories around the country. They have a relatively small distribution network, so they are you can find them at the health food store. You can find the brands at the health food store, but you can't find them at the grocery store, that sort of thing. There was only a few different types of vegan ice cream, for example. Shout out to everyone from the early 2000s who remembers Rice Dream and these other brands that were, in many ways, like not very good. They were vegan, but they weren't like the best. And then somewhere around like the early 2010s, the mid 2010s, what I started to notice was that companies were adopting a different approach to how they brought their products to market. So plant-based companies like Beyond Meat and Impossible were scaling very quickly, and the goal, they were arguably a lot more technologically difficult to make. It's not like making tofu or something, or making seitan, where it's a relatively simple recipe that involves a few ingredients and some particular techniques. Anyone can make tofu in their kitchen. Not anyone can make a Beyond Burger, right? It's just a much more technical process that involves different ingredients. And so, but companies had realized wow, these products are great. Like a Beyond Burger is just such a leap beyond, literally a leap beyond what a veggie burger had been, or what.
Yeah.
Sorry, there's a truck driving by. They were just such a big leap beyond what veggie burgers had been, and it was exciting for people because it really felt like plant-based foods were reaching a new level. But in order to bring those products to market, those companies needed to scale much more quickly. So you had companies like Tofurky, for example, that had been around for 20 years, right? And then you had companies like Beyond that had Beyond Meat only existed for a year or two before they had to go public, on the New York Stock Exchange, for example. I remember being very excited. I bought shares in Beyond Meat when it was first doing its IPO. And part of the reason they did that is because they needed the investment capital, right? They needed the investment capital to scale. And there were a lot of stories at the time, news stories around the explosion of plant-based eating. More and more people are going vegan. There was a lot of celebrity vegans and things like that. But that stuff is just ultimately unsustainable. It's when you see big food trends, food trends come and go all the time. I think in order to make the most sort of cutting edge plant-based products, it really requires more intensive capital. When it comes to food and food choices, none of us are just free-floating individuals making choices just based on our own desires. This is a nonprofit enterprise, right? Like Faunalytics and so many animal advocacy groups are nonprofits. And so it's very difficult to get organizations to talk about their failures, to talk about where they went wrong.
If this conversation made you think differently, challenged your perspective, or inspired you in some way, I would love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments. Share this episode with someone who might find value in it. And don't forget to subscribe to Caffelogue with Naga for more conversations at the intersection of technology, purpose, compassion, and positive change. Thank you for being part of this journey.